Okay, so today I'm going to talk about learning. Hi. All right, let me write hi. So I want to talk about the how learning or learning can make you. Um, but learning is what allows you to become unpredictable. And what I mean by that is that when um, it allows us to do unpredictable and complex things, and the ability to learn allows you to make connections and build connections to to so that you can um, put things together in ways that just you wouldn't be able to do in without learning. And what I'm trying to say is, so let's say you are, when you are creating something, when you are building something, it kind of it doesn't really, it's not something that becomes mechanized. It's something different than, say, a computer. And part of it is, I actually think it's not just random, because yes, I do believe there's some level of randomness to what we do, but there's also the how we put things. That there's also kind of this, our desires kind of come into play as well, and so it combines with the randomness, and so it's not really random, even though it can be. But it's like this mixture, an admixture of different things, where it's our desires, the things that we like and don't like, um, and sometimes we're playing, sometimes we're being serious, and sometimes we're not being serious. We're purposely being non-serious or unserious, or yeah, however you want to put that. Non-serious. We're not taking things seriously, and so the idea becomes, because of that, there is the unpredictability, the unpredictability of what we do. And the reason why I want to say this is because a lot of times, computers, they don't really think that way, because there's, I feel like computers, they have like too many, um the computers, they're kind of missing certain aspects that make a human. It's missing the consistency that a human has, and it's also missing the programming is also, it's not typically designed to um, to have a sort of, it's not designed to I don't know that a computer would be able to uh, would be able to put together, sort of organize itself in a way that a human mind does, because human brains, humans, they have sort of all kinds of emotions. We have emotions, we have feelings, and that affects what we choose. But also, um, but a lot of what we do is also about what we're willing to achieve. And so, um, part of the problem, I think, with computers is that a lot of computers, they want to um, computers want to be efficient, but sometimes inefficiencies are efficient. Sometimes there are certain ideas and concepts that escape what common thinking is. They're not what most people think, and yet they might be true. Just because something is not popular does not mean that it's true. And so, a lot of times, um, I would say most computers are designed to be, and I would include perhaps generative AI into this, but most computers are not designed to They're designed to do kind of the right thing, or whatever the society thinks is correct, right? And but the problem is, what is correct. In a lot of cases, there isn't a right or wrong answer, and so but it, and I don't just mean that in the most obvious ways, but I mean it in the most unobvious ways. So, for example, entire concepts, it might be easy to, to be able to say right and wrong about some, moral issues, but what about questioning the idea of the concepts themselves? So, for example, let's say like the idea that, for example, yellow is a happy color, right? Well, why does it have to be a happy color? Maybe you know, in some other alternate reality or universe, yellow might have a completely different way of being perceived. It might not be a happy color. It's some of the ideas we formulate around words are not actually really based on logic. It's a lot of it is just based on emotions and how we feel, and so that doesn't necessarily match up with how things have to be. But because we are so entrenched into our own society, that the way that we think, we just typically don't think about it in any other way. And also, we we don't think about it, but also I think most of us have never even realized, never really thought outside of that box, so to speak. And we don't need to either, because most people are saying, well, why think about it at all? And that's the thing, that's kind of the undoing of the human mind, or humans, I should say, is that few humans are actually willing to go all the way. And so most humans are predictable, right? Like they are. So I can understand why we might be tempted to think that. But in reality, there are the few sort of geniuses, and even the geniuses, believe it or not, they're not always creative either, to be honest with you. Like sometimes you could be a genius, but be a genius in a simple way. I mean, everyone, when you describe a genius, what does that even mean, right? Like it means so many different things, and you could be a genius in different ways. Like some people have extraordinary memory, others have sort of extraordinary ability on one issue, but usually it comes in a different form. And I actually don't think it's one way of doing things, but it's many things that describes excellence within a person. And so but in the same way, when we're dealing with the idea of unpredictability, and how learning, we can have, if learning is allowed to, if a person is allowed to use learning, what they learn, into if they're able to use it in using it with their creativity, or with let's say with creativity, or if they're able to use it and be able to create something sort of randomly, but also with purpose, and also using the context of whatever it is that their lifestyles have. So, for example, we are informed by what happens to us, what is in front of us, and what we see. And that's something that a computer, currently they can't really see things. They can't really, like they can't perceive the world around them and then have decisions, feelings about it. And so these are sort of differences between, I guess, how humans interact and how a computer might interact. Now, one of the issues that I would say is that, as humans, I really think that we don't often have that much control but at the same time, we're still kind of choosing, and we can choose to go one way or another. And that kind of makes me, that's what I mean by the unpredictability of it. But I think sometimes there is some level of choice within that unpredictability. And I think that's what makes that, like, maybe people can realize how, like, people can realize how our, when we make choices, it's not just that we are, we're not just doing things that are random, but instead we're doing things with a purpose, but alongside randomness. And I don't know that computers can replicate that. And learning, so the way I would connect this with learning is that learning is something that allows you to, when you learn a topic, it will kind of expand your horizon about what you can know. And then what you can know is actually going to inform you of what, how you see the world. Now, some people, if, depending on what you learn, it matters if you want to be relevant to a culture. But, my question is, imagine if you came up with your own, and your own way of doing things, it might not have as much market because other people won't understand what you're doing or why you're doing something. And so many, in each culture is different. And so, I feel like, so let's say you wanted to, I guess what I'm saying is you want to be able to make something relevant. And so that makes it, it's also just easier to, why reinvent the wheel? I think of, the Lord of the Rings, where Tolkien, is that how you say it? Tolkien? Yeah, where Tolkien kind of, he kind of invented his own language. He did a lot of things, right? He invented his own language, grammar, races or groups of people, or not people, but like groups of living things, I guess. And so, like, I think that's interesting that, it's interesting. Let me write that. Whoa, let's scroll down. It's interesting because, I don't think Tolkien is kind of a typical person, and most people, like, even if you could do that, right? Even if you did have the ability or the interest in creating your own world, because there is something beautiful about world building. But then, the next thing becomes, most people probably won't want to waste time kind of doing that, or it takes a lot of time. And, what I would say is, when we're dealing with, our lives, like, that's kind of the thing that prevents us, because when you're learning, right, you're also learning, am I creating my own thing? Am I world building? Or am I doing something that someone else has world built? Because I think a lot of people need to realize that no matter what, you are either doing what you created or you're doing what someone else created, right? So we use a language because it makes it easier to communicate. But somebody created that, right? Like, somebody came up with the definitions of words and concepts. And so that affects who can how people think in a way, right? Like, language is powerful enough to influence how you think about things. And so but when you're thinking about the creativity of people, and you're asking yourself, well, learning, right? Like, you can learn something, but when you teach yourself, right, when you are being a creative person, you're essentially teaching yourself. You're sort of teaching yourself concepts, because when you're let's say, you kind of have to, like, part of being creative is teaching yourself. You're kind of creating but teaching yourself something new because you're seeing something you haven't seen before, or using things in different ways. And so our brain, I do believe that there is some level of kind of where we can choose, but some things, where the ideas come from, right, that might not be our choice. And so it's a tricky it's a tricky thing, because you don't know if you can, let me scroll down, hold on, if you can really, it's hard to tell if you can really do it. So, but I forgot what I was saying there, but let me just go back, I guess, to the concept of how we have, I do think that one thing that, because of that unpredictability of what can come out of a person, this is why I actually think that I believe that I don't think you can fully replicate a mind, because what a mind doesn't follow kind of a formula. Most people, they have that level of unpredictability, but the problem is it's not an unpredictability that could ever be, and so that could ever be replicated. And I'm specifically talking about, for example, in Gen AI, when they say, oh, we can, replicate a song that the Beatles would make, or something like that, or we can write in the style of Shakespeare, and well, let's write a new something else that Shakespeare would have written. And they kind of, it's easy enough to make models based on how you wrote before. And yes, it is true that most of us, including myself, when you write something, you will recognize that there are certain patterns of speech that you follow, and that there are certain things that you just tend to say, or you tend to write things in a certain way, right? It's similar to how handwriting is, right? We tend to write a certain way. Like, people who are trained to study handwriting, they actually sort of, so the people who study handwriting, they can tell, I guess, like, if somebody actually wrote what someone did, or if they're imitating it. Well, it's kind of like that with how you think as well. But the thing is, I disagree, because I think with our actions, with regards to what we write, our actions, let's swipe here, our actions are influenced by just what we choose, and what we choose, or what we would have chosen, is something that can only exist in the present. And so even outside of it, I don't think you can ever fully replicate what someone would have done. I don't think that's accurate. Like, it just isn't. No, because I might have, just because I did something one way before doesn't mean that I would always do it that way. And likewise, an artist, just if you had said, well, let's try to make an album or a song that the Beatles might have made, right? In in a specific date, let's say, right, 1970 or something, I don't know, or earlier probably. But like, if we tried to replicate that, it wouldn't be the same, because it's just because the actual person, it's connected. It's not something outside. Our learning and our ability is not something that can be captured by AI or by anything, because that randomness, that's something that will never, that is not something that, if we were just robots that were programmable, then yes, if And so that's why I say that, if we were if I mean, I guess, there's different ideas of free will or whatever, what people call free will, but really if people, so I'm not sure, I guess how I might connect this is that, can you truly capture a human mind? and and I would argue that because of that unpredictability of humans, and also our choice, that just because I did something before doesn't mean that I'm going to do it the next time. I might choose to do something else. And I don't know when that would happen. It would just be random. And um, so that's why. Now, usually, it is true that we are influenced by what we see. So what we see can inspire us, right? If you live in Alaska or you live in a different part of the world, you're going to be influenced by what is available to you there. And so that is true. But then, so going back to what I was saying, can you truly capture the human mind and what someone is thinking? And I don't think you can. I don't think, and so that means that you cannot replicate a human that way. It's, what I would have done, how I would react to something, how somebody reacts is always going to be different. And that's kind of what makes friendships interesting, right? When you meet someone, you don't know what they're going to say, right? Like you don't, and it also means that as humans, we are, maybe it's just like, maybe it's, it might be that we are, that's what makes us special, I guess. And so in a way that's something that is attached to time. Humans are attached to a timeline, and so really our lives are attached to where we are in time, not just in space but in time. And so outside of us and what is happening now, that's where you are. And once, I don't think you can replicate that afterwards. And so I don't think it makes sense to say, now you can do something in the style of something, right? Like you can write in an iambic pentameter, right, for Shakespeare, or write a song, I guess, that kind of sounds like an early Beatles song, right, an early 60s Beatles song. But that doesn't mean that that's actually what would have happened. And doing something in the style is not the same thing as actually making it. Oftentimes it's missing the very subtle flourishes. Okay, Fluo. I think that's flourish. What was I saying? The flourishingness? Flourish. Now I'm forgetting. Flourish, that's an I. I hope I'm spelling that right. Okay. So, the flourishes, and what that means is the little details. When you write or you sing or you make music, it's not just usually, some artists or some people do repeat themselves, or perhaps more formulaic, in a way that is more formulaic. But most people will do things a little randomly, or a little. And so, but even if, so you might say, well, what if we made computers random, and just let them do random things? And the problem is that the randomness of today is not the same that the person would have done. And so, because it's not possible to know that, I think that's why, we really can't replicate the human mind like that, and probably never. But even though I think that is the case, I think learning. So getting back to what I was trying to say, I'm kind of going on tangents here, but with learning, it allows you, the more you learn, I'm not necessarily saying that it improves you or makes you smart, because not necessarily. Like, learning is something that learning is something that can expand you. And but the issue is, a lot of times it can increase. Perhaps it might be true to say that it can increase your ability to put things together, and so maybe in that case, you know but I don't necessarily think that. I mean, some people are constantly sort of in sort of imbuing themselves and placing themselves, connecting themselves to other things, reading lots of books, right? We typically associate that. Here, let's make a book, like a book and pages, or, well, no, that's hard to do. But what I'm saying is that, like, um, what I'm saying is that when people, they read, or they're learning something, and it's not just about, I think intelligence or learning is not just exposing yourself to so many things. Like, yes, the exposure is going to help you, and will teach you, obviously it'll teach you concepts, but I believe that learning is also something that, um, they are tools. Learning gives you tools, and those tools are what allow you to, when you apply the learning, the application of learning, when you apply when you apply, oh, it disappeared. Okay, the application of learning. Okay, so application means when you start doing it. So as opposed to, writing down notes and doing problems, that's not really doing it. It's when you start doing it, then all of a sudden, that's where you're charting new paths, and you're doing different things. And so, and what's interesting is, because we're talking about ideas, it's not like these are things, these are just concepts. And so something as simple as, I could imagine that somebody who, perhaps somebody who reads a lot might be able to identify things in in text in unique and creative ways that somebody who doesn't read as much would not. And likewise, somebody who writes a lot would be able to do it. Now, notice how just because someone reads a lot doesn't mean that they can do that creatively in writing. But also, when it comes to reading, I mean, I just said something where people, maybe the way they read is creative. They read it and process the information in different ways. Somebody might do it in a way that no one else has ever done so, and maybe never will, because so many of these ideas and how you manipulate them in your mind are things that, like, nobody ever really talks about. Nobody writes them down. Nobody writes about it. So when we talk about someone who is, extraordinarily, has extraordinary abilities, you really don't know why they are like that, right? Like, it could be because they just happen to think things through a lot, or they happen to have, they think about something that you would never think about. Like, maybe their approach to, you know, to doing something in their mind, there's a certain pattern that they follow, or a certain, way of doing things that nobody else really figures out. So it doesn't necessarily. What I'm saying is that because it's so undefined, I really think that we typically think of things in simple categories, but really, when you start thinking about how, things don't connect to each other in neat ways, I think, in nature. And by nature, I mean, not just nature, but everything. And the reason why is because it's things do not connect to each other. They're kind of um, when the way that, what was I trying to say here? Um, the way that I'm forgetting. All right. Well, I think I'll just say that when we're connecting different things, we are we're seeing sort of different um, we're seeing we're putting things together. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that when we um, when we read, or no, when we're doing something, the concepts are not connected oh, okay, what I was saying is they're not connected in sort of nice boxes, but instead they intersect and they connect in weird ways, in ways that defy what's logical or what makes sense or what anybody would do. And so the idea is that there is no box, is what I'm saying. There's no, people think you need to think outside the box. Not only do you need to think outside the box, but realize that there is no box and that you can kind of do whatever and wherever you want. And all of a sudden, that sounds like a philosophical thing, right? Because then, once you get to philosophy, you're kind of like, it's like anything goes. But really, I wonder if learning is like that too. That learning perhaps is something that is not meant to be so rigid. And yet in our society, we value rigidity, right? Even though um, concepts and ideas, the science and physical things are rigid, right? But ideas, they don't necessarily have to be rigid. And so, I guess I challenge people to think, when you're learning is all about learning ideas, right? You're not just learning about physical things, but you're learning about ideas. And when you are learning about ideas, suddenly you're dealing with things that don't necessarily fit a box, or that could be sort of beyond, it can go beyond and above what the average sort of person would think or do. And so, I challenge you to realize, okay, um, let me, when you're dealing with ideas, to realize that it doesn't comfortably fit into one concept. And so that can make it difficult, because see, most people, they get lost if they try to do it, or they never. Most people don't even realize that ideas can become concrete, and that you can build something with things that don't exist, so to speak, like imaginary numbers. But I guess, well, that's like an engineering thing, I think, but that's something else. But like, I'm talking like imaginary. All of a sudden, when you start creating things with things that don't exist, or it becomes sort of, it becomes different from it becomes something that because you're not dealing with physical things, you're creating ideas that didn't exist before and making new concepts out of it. That makes it trickier to quantify and trickier to identify. And I think Gen I is not really doing that, but I don't know that it would be able to do that. But maybe it could. But I'm saying this is one thing that I think humans really um, can still excel in, and most people don't. I mean, if you think about it, like philosophers, right, or psychologists, they kind of are creating a world when they try to define things. They're world building in a way, their own interpretation of how they think things are. And so there is something fascinating about doing this, and learning will give you the ability to do this, so that in your life you can put things together, you can bring things together and create something that fits into your life, And I hope that you are able to find something that kind of aligns with what you want to be and who you want to become. So basically, what I'm saying is that learning is um, there is something unpredictable about it, and something that it will help you be sort of. It's not learning is not just something about. It's not just about learning things that are, that are learning things that are already by the book, so to speak, or that are established. But really, I think you can learn. We learn to be able to create new things. And so I really like that concept. I think you'll see that I enjoy that. But the idea of creating, I guess, creation alongside building, or alongside learning, alongside creating things. And but the learning will help you to expand, and create and help you in, it exposes you to different things. So while that's not necessary, but it helps because once you learn the basic stuff, I think you can go pretty far. But even then, a lot of times you're going to sort of go back to how you were before, and so that's that's kind of what I feel. That's kind of how I feel about it. And I guess maybe I feel like this is a difficult topic for me to talk about, just because it's about ideas. It's not about physical things. It's about ideas. So that's it's hard to quantify. It's hard to when I start thinking about ideas, my imagination kind of goes beyond, or likes to go beyond, what has traditionally or already been done. And so, because to me that's how I see it, and so it's a challenge for me to speak on this. But I was just trying to say how learning it budges you in the right direction. But learning is not just what is typically learned, but also you teaching yourself the things that you have created. So when you create when you world build inside of yourself and create something, then I think that's also learning, if that makes sense. When you look within you and you choose to do something, you are learning. You're learning also. And so if perhaps there's a deeper meaning behind learning, that it's not just something that, learning is not just about taking what is outside, but also taking what is inside, and then discovering within yourself what you have discovered. So in that case, that's why I say that learning is unpredictable. That's kind of the context that I meant to say, which is that this is more so for sort of imaginative concepts that you think about, and really, because it's only something that could have happened. Also, it's only when a specific person, so whoever you are or whoever it is, that specific person, only when they think of something, whatever they thought of at that moment informs what they're going to do. And because it's not possible to do that, perhaps it'll always be an elusive thing that is not something that we can just easily replicate. Because I think, obviously, what your choice and who you are and how you would write a song or write a poem or what you would even say is not always something that can be predicted. And therefore, how can it be, how can that be something that Like, how can we simplify things and to that degree? Because, and we need to be careful because, in today's world, we want to simplify things. We want to, but really time is something that affects us all, and what's happening now is a result of time. It's a result of the choices that I have made. And so, in that case, the learning is not just what you do, but also you teach yourself when you come out, and you teach yourself when you come out and with new ideas, and you all of a sudden you're a student to yourself, which is a weird way of thinking about it. But I think that's something that is it's something that can happen. And it's also going to be informed by what we care about, and so thankfully we all care about different things, and hopefully we you'll be able to excel and create meaning for yourself, because you should celebrate what you like and who you are. And so all of that is affected by your who you choose, or what you choose to think about, and what you choose to create in your imaginary world. And so I guess I would just say, I would encourage you to world build your own world so that you live according to concepts and ideas that you love and care about. So do that, and you'll be good. And so thank you, and it'd be interesting, what you all think about this.